MDOT presents the Extra Mile Podcast, Legislative Session.
Welcome in to another edition of the Extra Mile Podcast Legislative Session. I'm MDOT Digital Media Manager Paul Catul, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Will Kraft. He handles government and constituent affairs here at the agency. And Will, Sine Die was on April 5th, and last week we had a great recap of the 2022 session from Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann.
That's right.
And if you haven't listened, please go check that out. It's certainly worth going back and looking at. And so we've made it. This is, of course, the last legislative episode of the Extra Mile
Bittersweet.
in 2022. Oh, yeah, definitely bittersweet. And no better way to wrap things up than to welcome back to the studio MDOT Executive Director Brad White. Brad, we always appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. And before we go any further, I want to commend all of y'all and the public affairs staff for the great job y'all did with the podcast this session. It's been phenomenal and was among the best across the nation, and you're all to be very commended.
Well, we appreciate it. It's a
I
team effort.
That's exactly right. I've joked before, I've got a face for radio, so this has been a fun experience for me, absolutely. We'll just jump right in. We've got a lot of good stuff to talk about today. I want to kind of get a recession recap. It was very successful by all accounts. I want to see if you could break down some of those highlights for us.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good session for us, the legislative leadership and the body in general. We're very receptive to all of the things that we were trying to discuss with them about ways that they could help us, as well as ways that they could unintentionally hinder us from being able to meet our mission. The main takeaways from the session is we received about $236 million extra in funds that are allocated to help us get the match of the federal dollars, a supplement to our paving program, a supplement to our capacity program, as well as another $100 million to work with our local partners on emergency road and bridge relief. The biggest things that came out of that, while the money is great and we're very appreciative, and it is certainly moving us in the right direction to eliminate the funding gaps that we've experienced in the past. The biggest thing, though, that I think, me personally, the legislature did for us was twofold. This is the first bill that MDOT's had, in my recollection, that had no earmarks in it. So for the first time, we'll have complete flexibility within our federal program and how we move funds, how we utilize federal dollars, and how we're able to be inventive in the ways that we need to be to meet the tasks that we have in
right.
providing for a transportation system around. And so the lack of those legislative edicts that would pigeonhole us or would unintentionally hinder us from being able to move in a way that we need to move, I think is going to prove to be probably the most beneficial thing that they did for us overall in the session. And I think we'll be able to prove that that's the model for how our budget should be handled and managed. But also, our number one task and goal throughout the session was to receive the authority necessary to continue the realignment of the salaries of our MDOT personnel. I think that that's been the most important thing that we as leadership of MDOT could do, is to take care of our own team of people and be sure that we're all adequately compensated for the work that we do. And the legislature came through for us on that. So as you know, we started a few months ago realigning as many salaries as we could. They've given us the authority where we can continue that into the next fiscal year. So hopefully we will be seeing big differences in what we can pay. And that will help us not just take care of our existing MDOT family and retain good and qualified people, but also allow us to be able to be more well-equipped to recruit people in the future.
Right. Absolutely. Plenty of positions out there open and available. Refer a friend, family member. We're hiring, folks.
Oh, yes. Now hiring. We'll certainly put a lot of those positions out there on LinkedIn, so please keep abreast of that on our social media. We did talk to Lieutenant Governor Hosemann last week, and he had a clear message. Now that these changes have been made, this additional money, these salary increases, there's a great responsibility that MDOT has to come through. So can you talk about kind of that?
That's right. And he's very much on point, and I agree with him 100%. This is something that the industry, the transportation industry, has been asking for additional funds for some time. And the flexibility they gave us in our budget, the extra funds they've given us, nearly eliminates the funding gap that the transportation industry has complained about for some time. So this next year is going to be a time for us to prove that we appreciate what they've given us and that we're able to do the work. And that's going to be a burden both on us but also on our partners in the private sector. We have a responsibility to get the work to the streets, and they have a responsibility to put the shovels in the ground and start moving dirt and doing the things necessary to bring these projects to fruition. And the chief engineer, some of the assistant chief engineers, and our chief of staff here and myself have already begun meeting with our partners in the various industries out there that does our work, and we're looking forward to working with them to be sure that we can deliver on what the legislature's given us.
No doubt. And this is going to be able to help us kind of speed up some of this work, if I understand correctly, right?
Yeah, one of our biggest concerns actually was the cost of inflation, material costs going up. So we were concerned early on that the projects we originally had scheduled in a 3-year plan, we would not even be able to make any real headway in getting through that list because all of a sudden those projects were going to cost considerably more than they did before due to the rise in material costs. So the extra money, first of all, will help offset any delays that would have occurred due to inflation. And then they'll allow us to escalate some other projects that were maybe for a year or two down the line, maybe into this year. So it's going to help us on a couple of different fronts.
Good.
Moving right out of the session, no rest for the weary. It's been a very busy week here at MDOT. We've had 2 very special events this week. Go ahead and touch on one of those. The Fallen Workers Memorial Ceremony actually today. It's a very important thing for us, but speak about just, if you will, what that means to us here.
Well, I think Commissioner Simmons said it best at the ceremony when he talked about how it's one of those events that you wish we didn't have to have. It's unnecessary. But I think it's lost on a lot of people that MDOT's frontline workers are people that are helping work in these construction zones, doing work like was done on I-20 over the past weekend. The people that are on the front line when ice storms come or hurricanes or tornadoes, they're out on the streets and they're helping us, that they're away from their families and they're putting themselves in harm's way all the time. And so most of the motoring public sometimes I don't think realize that they literally are driving through people's offices.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we've had quite a number of people that have paid the ultimate sacrifice just by being on duty. And that's very unfortunate, and it's a loss that I don't know if y'all could tell, but regardless of how long the MDOT team member had passed away, every one of the family members in the crowd were still emotional. So it's a wound that doesn't heal for these families, and hopefully it's a reminder to the motoring public around that when you see orange, when you're coming into a work zone, it's a desperate need to try to slow down and to heed all the warnings and heed the signs, because you don't just have MDOT workers out there, you have people's sons and daughters and mothers and fathers, and it's a really somber situation. But I think the memorial service itself was a very successful one, and appreciate the work that y'all's team did in putting it together.
You know, as you mentioned how dangerous it is out there and can be for our workers, I was looking at some of the preliminary data that NHTSA released already for this year, but it looks back on the first half of 2021. We've had actually not just the state of Mississippi, but across the nation, over 20,000 deaths, fatalities on the roadway, and that's an 18% increase over 2020. So, you know, be aware, look around, put the phone down, and one of the leading contributors to those fatalities was just simply speeding. You know, everybody's trying to get there in a hurry, but it's a team sport when we're on the road. And I know, Paul, you sign off every day with Drive Safe, but it really hits home when you have that ceremony like he just mentioned today. So, you know, keep your eyes open out there and be aware.
And keep in mind, we're just talking about the fatalities. We have a lot of workers that have been hit by vehicles and been hurt. We've had one just in the last couple of months that a driver came through and wasn't paying attention and unfortunately struck one of our employees. And I'm told that the only thing that saved him was another member of our staff that was spotting things and alerted him in time for him to try to get out of the way, and basically he got clipped, but saved his life. So it's a very serious and real thing.
Absolutely. Put down the phone and, don't speed. Just don't do it. It's not that difficult. We talked about this quite a while back, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, still out there. Just as a refresher for everyone, what does that mean kind of for Mississippi, if you could just kind of take us back a little bit?
Well, a couple of things. As you know, Federal Highway, Congress authorizes them to do work with their partners like us in the different states and territories every 5 years. And the last 5-year authorization, Mississippi was given, I think it's about $2.5 billion over the 5-year period, give or take a little bit, with which to carry out Federal Highways programs and take care of our state and interstate system around the state. This current 5-year authorization that we're moving into now, Congress upped that to about $3.3 billion over 5 years. So in the regular programs that we've been operating in, we're going to have, a few $100 million extra over 5 years that we'll be able to put to work to help escalate projects and get things done. The biggest difference that most people in Mississippi will see from that is it has allowed the Transportation Commission to abandon this moratorium on capacity projects that had existed for about 10 years, by and large, a moratorium. And we're now able to revamp various projects from the Tennessee line all the way to the Gulf Coast that are designed to help increase the capacity and the safety and economic development opportunities of our system around the state. So the extra money will go a long way in allowing us to meet those types of needs that have gone unmet for quite some time. But in addition to that, there was about $300 million worth of over 5 years of funds that are going into new programs like a new bridge program, electric vehicle charging stations that we're putting a plan together now that we expect to have complete by August on how to implement that based on the Federal Highway Administration's guidelines and instructions. So it will allow us to do other things that may be somewhat new in nature to help our state and to help move us further into the 21st century.
Excellent.
The other, circle back just a bit there, mentioned having such a busy week, and two special ceremonies. One we just talked about, certainly, but Commissioner Dick Hall, former Commissioner Dick Hall, honored here at the MDOT building. I know you and the Commissioner are very close. That was a very good event, well attended. Speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was personally a nice event for me. Dick Hall, as you mentioned, gave me one of my first jobs in public service that was here at the Department of Transportation when he first became a commissioner 23 years ago. And so my first introduction into public service was here, and my office was actually right around the corner from where it is now. And so that's where I fell in love with the Department of Transportation and its people for the first time, was working there with Commissioner Hall and coming to know him. He's a very opinionated and strong-willed guy, but very honest and very unwavering in his commitment to the department, to the people of the state. And so working with him during my early and mid-20s really did a lot to shape me as a person and to help me go on to do other things. And so it was a meaningful time to bring together the MDOT family and to celebrate the career of someone who has served the agency as the longest serving commissioner in our history. And in addition to that, I think what added to it to make it more special was we had all 7 living transportation commissioners present. So you had the 3 current commissioners, but former Congressman Ronnie Shales came back for that. Commissioner Mike Taggart came back, who served on the commission with Commissioner Hall. And then, of course, Commissioner Zach Stewart from North Mississippi. And so having them present, I think, just went further to illustrate what a family the Department of Transportation is, and that atmosphere that makes people enjoy working here and certainly makes it a special place for me. So it was very meaningful on a lot of different fronts. Got to see a lot of people we haven't seen. You've heard me reference some of the fine Christian men and women that helped make me want to come back and work here at the department. People like Wendell Ruff and Ann McAlpin and Shirley Rutland. And being able to just see those people that I haven't seen in many years was very special as well. So I thought it was a nice event, and again, appreciate everything Public Affairs does to make those things come off and seamlessly.
No doubt, Commissioner Dick Hall is certainly a very special man who's done a lot for MDOT and the state of Mississippi as a whole. Do want to, as we begin to really put a bow on the session, is there anybody you want to send a special thanks to? Any legislators are out there? Any groups?
Well, the legislative leadership, certainly, Governor Hoseman and Speaker Gunn had an open door policy from the very beginning and worked with us. Our appropriations and authorization chairman, Senator Branning, Representative Busby, Representative John Reed, Senator Briggs Hobson, obviously would be among the top to thank just due to their position and how they helped be the tip of the spear in working with us to try to craft something that was worthwhile. But the way that the entire body coalesced around that and supported that, I think everybody deserves a debt of gratitude from the men and women of MDOT. But I would add to that the folks that make up the staff at the Legislative Budget Office, because they're the ones that really did a lot of the work to help put pen to paper and craft legislation that was not harmful but was helpful. And they worked hand in glove with our budget people here, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Leanne Robinson and all of those great people that worked for Elbow and the work that they did to help get us where we are.
Excellent. As you always say, state government is a team sport, so that's just an example of it right there. Lots of people.
Coming up on closing in on really a year at MDOT, since you came back and joined the team here, is there anything that maybe you found over the course of the last 12 months that was new or different? I'm sure there was a lot different from the time you were here originally to now, but anything that jumps out?
No, not really. It was, all the things that made me love the place before still exist. It's some different people in places, but by and large, it's still a lot of folks that, you don't have or I haven't experienced the backbiting or the underhandedness that you may have in a competitive place.
Sure.
Everybody here truly seems to function as a team. We like to see one another succeed. I think everybody here recognizes the old saying of a rising tide raises all ships, and just being able to be in a room full of professionals that when we lay a task in front of us that we have to do, and everybody's willing to state their opinions and then start altering opinions to find that consensus and that perfect answer that is needed to be able to go out and to succeed in a way that makes the department look good and best serves the state of Mississippi. So just being able to be in an environment like that makes it worthwhile. One thing I have not liked about it is I didn't realize how much I would be anchored to the Jackson office as much. I'm hoping that in the coming months I'll be able to get out and be in the districts more and get around more of our staff that are the hands and feet of what we do and be able to meet them and personally thank them for what they do. And tomorrow I'm going up to Tupelo to the service awards there. So things like that I haven't been able to do due to the legislative session and other things I'm looking forward to doing now.
Well, that piggybacks us right on to the traveling around the state question.
It's the question.
The one, our number one listener out there who's a close relative of the co-host here. I've got to make sure we get to it, the food question. So you're going to be spending a lot of time, you've already spent a lot of time traveling around the state. Is there a hole in the wall, a stop in somewhere that you just got to get to every time?
Well, it just depends. I'm a bad creature of habit. If anybody ever wanted to knock me off, they wouldn't have a hard time finding me because I pretty much go the same places. So here in Jackson would be Martin's, Farmers Market. If I'm going south, I try to stop by Zips in home county of Simpson County. It sells one of the best hamburgers around. And then when you talk about dinner, I don't think or supper, as we used to say in the country, Mayflower and Crochelle's would probably be my top of my list when I'm thinking about where to go.
I have not been to the Mayflower in quite some time. I'll have to make a point to do that.
Oh, wow.
And a little change up, we thought it appropriate to divulge our favorite stops. So, Paul, by all means.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm going to make it real easy. Elvy's in Belhaven and Jackson is my favorite spot. Also give a special shout out to Local 463. Before I came to MDOT, I cooked there. I was a line cook, kind of weird. But anyway, that's my spot. And Will, give me yours.
Okay, so mine are good too. Shady Acres, as you're going down 49 South, heading to Hattiesburg, in Seminary there. It's on the left. Again, if you're going south, north is on your right. Shady Acres, it's a great spot. It's kind of you can get your vegetables, your fresh vegetables, a little garden market. One of the best burgers I've ever had, and you get some homemade ice cream. It's kind of a really nice family environment. They've got all kind of old antique farm equipment stuff to look at out there. It's really cool. And I just absolutely can't pass Jerry's Fish House without
That's a good one.
fill myself to the point of death. They make the best catfish. Not hating on anybody else's catfish out there, but the Igloo does it pretty good.
It's good Simpson County people, too.
That's right. That's right.
There we go. I'm outnumbered. 2 Simpson County, 1 Madison County person here today. All right, so that wraps up the Extra Mile Podcast legislative session, and we're going to give you a little news going forward. So going forward, we're going to do this twice a month, and I, for one, am very glad that Will Kraft is going to continue to be my co-host. You've done an excellent job jumping in here, so we're happy to have you going forward.
I very much appreciate that. I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
I'm glad, for sure. Everybody's been happy to have you. And, so we're basically just going to continue conversation with MDOT employees and other stakeholders with transportation infrastructure in the state and, others outside of the agency. We've got a lot of surprises for you. We're really excited about
some
it.
Good guests lined up, yep.
No doubt. So look forward to that. Without further ado, we'll really wrap things up and thank our listeners out there for tuning in to the Extra Mile Podcast. We also want to thank our producer, Katie Hornsby, our editor, Drew Hall. And remember, you can listen and watch each episode by visiting gomdot.com/The Extra Mile. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. The handle is @MississippiDOT. And as always, remember to drive smart out there on Mississippi highways.